Okay, here we go with the Trig Study Guide, Part 2, starting with number 16. It says, determine the period of y equals -4 sine 6 pi x. Here's our formula. To find our period, we need 2 pi over b. In this particular problem, the b value is 6 pi. So when you simplify 2 pi over 6 pi, you get 1/3. Number 17, determine the phase shift of the function. To determine the phase shift, you take this part, set it equal to 0. When you solve for x, you get -pi over 3, which means it's pi over 3 movements to the left. Number 18 says find the amplitude. The amplitude is half the distance from the highest point to the lowest point. The highest point is 7, the lowest point is 3. That distance is 4. When you take half of it, you get a value of 2. Question 19 says determine the period of the graph. The period is the distance needed to complete one whole cycle. And if you'll start at -3 and follow it all the way to +3 pi, from -3 pi to +3 pi, it's completed one cycle. So that period is 6 pi. Find the exact value. So we're going to use our calculator. Make sure your calculator is in degree mode. And we're going to do second tangent. Oh, we don't want to use the calculator here. We want to use the unit circle. I was going too fast. On the unit circle, okay, you need to pull your unit circle out for this one because it says find the exact value, tan inverse of -pi over 3. Remember that the tangent is y over x. So you're looking for when the y value is -3 and the x value is 1. Okay, and the only one of those that works here is -pi over 3. If you're looking at your unit circle, you might find that it also, you might also find it occurred at 5 pi over 3, but that wasn't an answer choice. 21 says solve the right triangle, round the lengths to 1 decimal place, and express your angles to the nearest tenth of a degree. Well, the first thing we're going to do is just subtract from 90 to find our missing angle B at 41.8. Then I'm going to use what I know about sine. The sine of 48 is equal to the opposite over the hypotenuse. And I'm going to solve that. So I'm going to take the sine of 48.2 and I'm going to multiply that by 46.1. And that's going to give me 34.4. Now, are they asking me for that? Yes, they are. They're asking me for 34.4. I'm also going to find B the same way. I'm going to take the cosine of 48.2. I'm going to multiply that by 46.1. And it's going to give me 30.7. Says use the given figure to find the bearing from O to B. From O to B, you're going to start out traveling north, and you're going to have to swing towards the west 47 degrees. If that's a 43-degree angle, then what's missing here is 47. 23, simple harmonic motion, has a frequency of 5/2 oscillations per second with an amplitude of 4 feet. Write an equation in this form. Well, we know that our amplitude is 4. If we're making 5/2, which is 2.5 oscillations per second, that means we're going around more than one time. So it's taken me 2/5 of a second to make 1. So I'm going to take my period, which is 2 pi, and I'm going to divide it by, it's equal to 2 pi over omega is equal to 2 over 5. I'm going to solve this. 2 omega is equal to 10 pi. When I divide by 2, I get omega is equal to 5 pi. So that goes right in there, and my equation is 4 sine 5 pi t. A tower that's 138 feet tall casts a 144-degree shadow. Find the angle of elevation. So we're going to go to our calculator. We're going to make sure we're in degree mode. We're going to hit second sine because I don't know the angle, but I do know the ratio. It's 138 divided by 144. And the angle of elevation, that's not going to give me the angle of elevation. pardon me, I had sine when I needed tangent. So I'm going to need second tangent of 138 over 144, and that's going to give me, rounded to the nearest degree, my 44 degrees. Question 25, I put a star by these because you're going to need to look at your identity sheet, but cosecant is equivalent to 1 over sine, so I'm going to write it as 1 over sine, and then I'm going to distribute. And when I do that, I get sine over sine plus cosine over sine, and this simplifies to 1 plus cotangent x. 26, write the expression as a function. I'm going to go back to my sheet, and I'm going to look, and when they're subtracting those, they're doing the difference, I'm going to write it this way: sine of alpha times cosine of pi over 2 minus cosine alpha sine of pi over 2. Now the cosine of pi over 2 is 0, the sine of pi over 2 is 1. So when I multiply here, it doesn't even matter what sine is. When you multiply by 0, you're going to get 0. And this is going to stay as cosine alpha. So 0 minus cosine alpha is negative cosine alpha. 27, I'm going to set this equal to 0. I'm going to solve it using algebra. I get the cosine of x is equal to the square root of 3 over 2. So I went to my unit circle, and cosine's positive, which means I'm in quadrant 1 and quadrant 4. And then I found my values on my unit circle where that would happen would be pi over 6 and 11 pi over 6. And then we have the rest of our formula there. 28, I'm going to factor the cosine squared x plus 2 cosine x plus 1 into two binomials. I get cosine of x plus 1 and cosine of x plus 1. Then I set those equal to 0. So cosine of x could be negative 1, or I get the same thing, negative 1. So I'll look in my unit circle, and cosine is negative 1 when we are at pi. So that is my answer there. And I'm only looking at the interval from 0 to 2 pi, so that's my only answer. 29, I'm going to factor as well. It has a common factor of cosine x. I'm going to take that out. So cosine x times 1 minus 2 sine x could equal 0. I'm going to set each of those equal to 0. Cosine x could equal 0, and that would put me at these two locations on the unit circle. If I solve this, sine of x is equal to negative 1 over negative 2, which is actually 1/2, and that occurs at these two locations on the unit circle. So be sure you have your unit circle with you when you're taking your test. Number 30, solve the triangle, round the lengths to the nearest tenth, and the angle measures to the nearest degree. Well, you know A and you know B, so you find C by subtracting from 180, and we get 103. Then I use the law of sines, and I set up my ratios, and I found that A was 11.7 and B was 20.7. I took my calculator and I did 26 times the sine of 26, and I divided that by the sine of 103, and that gave me 11.69, which rounded to 11.7. Then I moved over, and I knew that C was 26, so I did the same thing here. I took 26 times the sine of 51. I divided that by the sine of 103, and I got 20.7. 31 says two sides of an angle of a triangle are given. Determine whether the given measurements produce one triangle, two triangles, or no triangle at all. So I solved using the law of sines with what I knew. I solved for angle A. I set up sine B, which was 26 over 7 equals sine A over 20. When I solved, I found that sine A was equal to 1.25. Well, sine can never be larger than 1, so that told me I had no triangle. 32, solve. I used the law of cosines, and I set all this up. I just put all that in my calculator, and I found that C was 16.8. Then I used the law of sines because I thought it was easier to set up the sine of C over side C and the sine of A over side A, and I found A to be 21 degrees. And since I knew C and I knew A, I just subtracted to find angle B. 33, It says the tower leans at a degree of 84.7 degrees. It's 175 feet from the base to the tower. The angle of elevation to the top is 49.2. Find the distance from the base to the top. So I'm looking for B. So I just set up the law of sines. I plug that in. It's going to be 175 times sine of 49.2. And then I would end up dividing that by the sine of 46.1. And that gives me 183.8, which is 184 when I round. 34, find the distance across. This is the law of cosines. You'll put all of that in your calculator. Make sure you're in degree mode. It'll give you your answer. 35, solve the triangle. They give you A and they give you C, so you just subtract to find B, and then you can use the law of sines a couple of times to find your missing sides. Now we move to vectors. Vector V is negative 9i plus 2j, and vector W is negative I minus 4j. Find 6w plus 4v. I just multiplied each member of W by 6. I wrote it over here. Multiplied each member of V times 4. I wrote it here. I combined the two. 37, ask for this question. So to find this, we need to take W minus U first. So I do that here. And this is what I'm trying to apply those to, which just simply means you're going to take the square root of negative 5 squared plus 4 squared. So when I work that out, I get the square root of 41. And then I find U dot V, which just means I'm going to multiply my I coefficients together and my J coefficients together. I'm going to add them up and get negative 102.